Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. You ready?
Ready.
All right, let's do it. All right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back. Super excited to have back Alisa Zipursky. Alisa, welcome back.
Thank you. Thrilled to be back with you.
Awesome. So Alisa is a storyteller, writer, facilitator, and childhood sexual abuse survivor. She's also an author. Her work focuses on offering emotional support to other young survivors healing from sexual trauma. Alisa's book, recently out, is titled Healing Honestly, The Messy and Magnificent Path to Overcoming Self-Blame and Self-Shame. Your website, Alisa, I just want to point out, which is healinghonestly.com, I love it. And there's one part I was just looking over, and it says, I can't even know if I can find it now, but it says something about healing. Oh, I think it's in your about section where you have something about you talk about yourself and you say the story of your experience is more funny than you would think. Something like that.
I always say it's funnier than you'd think.
There you go. Yeah.
And people are always, I always feel like I have to put that out there. And even with the book, I'm like, it's funnier than you think. I have to tell you, like, the publishing world did not know how to respond to us directing them to like sell and talk about this book as being funny. They're like, how can a book that's helping, people healing from childhood sexual abuse be funny? I can't say that in a meeting with, Amazon executives. And we're like, you sure as shit can, and you better. Humor is a critical part of my healing process and of so many other people's too.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to get into the book, but before we get into all of that, remind our listeners or tell our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
So I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and in the past year was sort of a banner year for me. The book came out. I got pregnant and then moved across the country with my dog and my husband at 20 weeks pregnant to beautiful, amazing California. I'm in San Jose, sitting outside my window here is a fig tree where I get to watch the high drama of the squirrels and the birds fight for the best figs. So I'm still in very much like romantic honeymoon in love with California phase.
Well, I mean, for me, it lasted a long time. So hopefully it will for you too. It's an amazing place. So, this whole, I guess the value that humor holds for you, when you put humor and trauma or humor and abuse in the same sentence, I think a lot of people might not know what to do with that. But you wear that, you honor that, and it shows up a lot in what you do, and certainly even your website, and throughout your book too. How did all this start for you? Give us, I hate to use the word thumbnail, but give us a glimpse of how all this began for you.
How all this began for me was almost 10 years ago, being 27 years old, really processing my childhood sexual abuse in a way that I had been for several years in adulthood, but at 27, I really was ready to stop in my feelings, feeling like people were sort of forcing me to hide this part of myself. And I wanted to just be all of me. And all of me meant being funny and being ambitious and wanting to have a good time with my friends and being really into my boyfriend, and also not wanting to hide that the trauma that I experienced to no fault of my own was still impacting every aspect of my being. And so I felt really alone in that. I felt like what was out there was either written in a clinical aspect or written in like a memoir. And I felt so isolated because memoir for me felt really re-traumatizing.
Mm.
And the clinical stuff just sort of made me feel a heaviness, like there was something like fundamentally wrong with me. And
When you say
I
clinical
just
stuff, were you referring to like popular psychological books on trauma?
Yeah,
Okay.
books written by therapists, even like websites just being like, here's what to expect when you're living with PTSD,
Right.
or, and it's like photos of like veterans and like,
Hmm.
which is understandable, but not at all reflective of my experience. Books written by doctors, for certainly reading The Body Keeps the Score, these really popular readings that offer something in a clinical perspective, but that actually doesn't, for me, connect me to my humanity.
Mm.
And I wanted to feel like a whole human being. And I assumed and hoped that there were other people out there that felt the same way, who had been through what I had been through. And so I launched my website in this hope and a prayer that there were other young people out there who were all of these things, who thought, gifs of Parks and Recreation was funny, and, references to Golden Girls, and also needed support dealing with the complex nature of like the way trauma impacts memory and things like that. And it really took off from there. Healing Honestly is a website, has had over 500,000 readership, which is amazing, and evolved into Healing Honestly, the book. And, lots of works, doing speaking and engagements, both on college campuses and with advocacy organizations, and working with therapists. And, really for me, I am obsessed, not with the what happened, but with the what now. Like, what do we do
Mm.
now? And how do we find ways to live full and vibrant lives that we so richly deserve?
Okay. There's a lot there. You're working with a therapist, working on college campuses and so forth. But what did you want to say? First of all, did you feel, you're saying something really important in that, and a lot of people I talk to, you come at this from a very unique perspective. You do. Not everyone's coming with humor in the conversation, let alone at maybe even at the front of it, honoring that, but you're saying, I wanted to be who I was. Did
Yeah.
you, was when you were, I'm assuming at some point you did read those books maybe that
Oh, I've
you
read a lot of those
was,
books too.
and what is the feeling? Are you, when you're reading
Yeah.
these, maybe you're getting some information, but are you not seeing yourself in it? Are you feeling,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It felt, there's a mix of things. I think in memoir that's written by other survivors, I think for me, what I felt is this feeling of, in reading somebody else's experience, the bias in my mind due to rape culture and the way that survivors are treated in this world by the people around them and society writ large was that like what happened to me doesn't count and isn't real. So I would read other survivors' experiences and be like, oh, that trauma, that's real capital T trauma. What happened to me? And then I would find a way to minimize my own pain because that's what had been done to me by the people around me, by the world at
mm,
large, ad nauseum. And so I couldn't even take in the sense of connectedness, that you would ideally get from reading a memoir, because all I could feel was my own internalized minimization of what I had been through. And it's why the first chapter in my book is called, it's surrounding the debunking this myth that there is some quote unquote real survivor out there. And for XYZ reason, I'm not it. Because I know what it's like to pick up these books that are probably filled with a lot of really helpful stuff, but you can't
Mm-hmm.
even get to that useful stuff because you're so you've been programmed by everyone around you to think like, oh no, that person who's writing that, their shit is real, but mine
Mm-hmm.
doesn't count and isn't as real as theirs. And so that sort of speaks to the memoir. And then the stuff written by psychiatrists and doctors and things like that kind of just made me feel like I was like a traumatized lab rat. Like I don't need to read about the health outcomes that I am likely going to be subjected to because of something that happened to me as a child that I had no control over. That wasn't my fault. On one hand, it's like I need to know some of that because I
Right.
need to be able to educate my doctors and advocate for myself to say, like, hey, I am much more likely to have, risks of cancer and risks of heart disease and this, that, and the other because of my trauma. And at the same time, a lot of it makes me feel like I'm doomed. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
feel like that either. And so I think, there's a real mix and not to, really call people in on this work. But, I think we can all be honest here. The most impactful book written about trauma that, has been on the bestseller list for literally years is Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. And for many, many survivors, we cannot even get through the introduction because it opens with a story about a man in Vietnam who sexually assaults a Vietnamese woman and then murders a man. And we are supposed to identify with the American soldier, not with the woman who was sexually assaulted or the man who was murdered. And it opens with this casual reference of sexual violence. And, to me, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this book wasn't written for us,
Right. Right.
and maybe it was survivors like me, we weren't supposed to find ourselves in these books. That's not what
Mm-hmm.
they were written for.
So, at what point did you say, I want or I need to write my own book"?
Yeah, it wasn't my idea. It was my editor and my agent are both open about this. They are both survivors and they both came to my work through my website for personal reasons and saw the work and saw that there is so little out there for us. And each independently approached me about working together on this book. And the three of us, became this little powerhouse triangle of survivorship and support and badassery. And together we did this. When you're writing a book proposal, one of the key components of any book proposal is you write a list of comparable titles. So you're writing what is out there and what is out there for this audience and what's out there for this audience from, this general perspective. And it was like so minimal, a self-help book for childhood sexual abuse survivors, for which there are millions of us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that was not written by a doctor or therapist.
And
you know,
what did you
yeah,
want to do differently?
I wanted it to feel like a conversation between friends. And I wanted it to feel like, okay, I know this shit is so scary. I know for those of us who've been on our healing journeys, we usually have a stack of books that we have read like a couple of pages of and then put down, or like
Mm.
just for whatever reason cannot bring ourselves to read. And I wanted to say, I know diving into this stuff is hard. And I want to make it as approachable and accessible and comfortable and not so damn scary to be able to get the support we all deserve. And so, the cover of my book is like vibrant and orange and beautiful and welcoming because I wanted it to be like, even if it sits on your nightstand for a year, let it look fucking gorgeous. Let it be a vibe. And And I wanted it to use real language we use with our friends, cursing, jokes, talking, because we should be able to use the language that we use to talk about any other aspect of our lives, to talk about our trauma and to talk about healing. And because that's, to me, in my opinion, how we become integrated. So it's not this like dark, scary thing that lives all the way over here. It's all, we get to be a whole ass person in our healing. And
Mhm.
so I wanted it to feel like a friend who felt approachable and conversational. And that is honestly what I hear from so many therapists who recommend this book to their clients and their patients is they're like, I can say this stuff as a therapist until I am blue in the face. But
Mhm.
until they hear it from another survivor, it hits differently. And so this book is not to replace therapy, to replace therapeutic modalities, not to be a substitute, but an addition, because there is something that can come from hearing from other people who are
Of
like, I
course.
see you. I have these same scary ass voices in my head, and you are not alone, and we can figure this out together.
It's amazing. Since the book has come out and what has been out, what, a
A
year?
year now. Yeah, like almost
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. What's it been like for you? What have you heard from readers? What has been your experience?
Well, it's been really beautiful to hear from people. I think the thing that I didn't expect that has been really overwhelming is not just hearing from people who have read the book themselves, but all the people who gift it to each other.
Mm.
So somebody reaching out to me being like, my bestie, knew I was struggling and gave me this book. My therapist recommended this book. My sibling is also reading this book. So now we can talk together and understand each other. For me, what has been so beautiful and exciting and emotional is to see that this book has afforded people sort of like a shared language, a
Mhm.
shared approach, so that, even if you're struggling within like your family unit, your chosen, like your friendships, your relationships, your partners, somebody else can read this book and be like, I get you now. Like I get what you've been trying to communicate to me. So for me, it's been really beautiful to see it used as this tool to have deeper conversations and that's like so beautiful to me because this book is obsessed with relationships, obsessed with your friend. There's a whole chapter on friendships. There's a whole chapter on dating. There's a whole chapter on sex. There's a whole chapter on family. Like being in relationship in my opinion is like what makes us feel alive, and that's like
Mhm.
what life is about. And so hearing that this book is a tool to help people be in relationship with each other is like really profoundly moving to me.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this, Elisa. I'm wondering if there was a distance, there was a kind of a chasm, or there was a distance that you had to cross to get to this point. Because
Mm.
when you first were, or when you were, and I'm sure to a certain extent you're still dealing
Oh
with,
yeah.
of course, you know,
Yeah.
working with that and dealing with the trauma and how you were moving through life, were you similarly as in touch with yourself, with your humor, with your
Mm.
love of relationship? Or was that something that you needed to find again? And now that you found that, okay, I can write about
Mm.
that and share the importance of that.
I think I've always been obsessed with feelings. I was like the kid, in third grade on the playground being told I should be a therapist. I was always really obsessed with feelings and always obsessed with hearing people's stories and being in relationship to people. But I think what changed for me was the compartmentalization. And I used to just put the whole ass part of myself just on the shelf. And I was like, this is too dark and scary to share with people. This is too dark and scary. I isolated a lot in earlier stages of my life. I desperately needed people and didn't know how to need them and didn't know it was okay to need people and didn't know how to navigate conflict and boundaries. Um, and so I think for me, like what has changed is like a is addressing my own internalized shame and learning how to just show up and be honest with people. You know, in the back of the book, I shout out my bestie Sarah and say, you know, thank you for letting me show up at your house crying all the time, you know? And
Mm.
it was like, we didn't have to talk about it. You know, old me, if I was, you know, going through a difficult trigger, would have isolated and shut down, or maybe sought help in a way that wasn't healthy, like lashed out at somebody for not reading my mind and knowing what I needed. And and now I'm like, you know, I text my bestie and I'm like, I am a fucking disaster. I'm going through a trigger. She knows what that means now. And I was like, can I just come sit on your couch so I'm not alone? And I got out of the house. And she's like, yeah, sure. And I can show up and be a wreck and be loved and be seen. And also like acknowledge that whatever her needs might be in that moment too, you know? And so I think like that has definitely shifted in time of like, I don't have to be ashamed of what I'm
Hmm.
going through. I don't have to hide. And in fact, when I'm more honest about those things, it actually, I think it helps my friends and the people around me. I try to model that kind of honesty because I think it then helps. I've noticed over many years, like then when shit hits the fan for them, they can use that kind of language to reach out and be connected, even though they're struggling.
You mentioned your bestie, Sarah. Were
Mm-hmm.
there other people or resources that you had? Were there therapists who helped you through
Oh,
this?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I
Okay.
had three amazing therapists throughout the time this book was written. And now I have a new one who's also amazing. And she's the first one since I moved to California. She's the first therapist I've ever had who's like explicitly a trauma therapist. And it is dope as hell. And I've never had to explain myself less. It's amazing. Shout out Amy. And and so now, so this is now my fourth therapist I've worked, you know, really meaningfully with. So I've always had incredible therapists. My best friend, Kate, you know, I'm lucky to call a lot of people my besties. She I call her my professional bestie. She worked in the sexual violence field starting when she was in high school and then in college, and then has been now with the organization Futures Without Violence, doing anti-violence work and violence prevention work for over a decade. And so
Well,
she was really critical in my early stages of processing my trauma because she knew and understood what was happening to me when I didn't understand. So she could say things like, it's totally normal to feel guilty.
mm,
It's totally normal to feel like this shame. And it's not your fault. And just because you feel that way doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. And you know, like it's normal to not remember things. And she was able to, again, like in that, in the most extraordinary way, like have that clinical, like a literal expertise
yeah.
to be able to show up for me. And she'll tell you, she's like, yeah, I had all this training, but showing up for a friend like that is different, you know, when you love somebody like that. But
Right.
she became really a huge inspiration for healing, honestly, because I was like, how many other people have a best friend who has had decades
Hmm.
of trauma informed work supporting survivors. So she has been a real North Star for me of like, how can I be somebody else's Kate?
I'm interested in the work you've done with in colleges.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like?
So, a lot of the work I've done in universities is really to support, I always say, support survivors and the people who love us on campus. That there's actually also a lot of attention, not enough, but a fair amount of attention paid towards sexual violence and harm that happens while you're on campus. And it's a real yes and because yes, that matters. And we're really missing the boat because so many students are showing up with sexual violence already in their lives, right? We know
Mm,
anywhere from 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are before their 18th birthday are experiencing sexual violence. So for us to really be centering campus-based violence, and not paying attention to childhood based traumas is really us not meeting people at some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. And so a lot of the work I do on campus is integrating that, is making connections between things we might have experienced in childhood and things we might be experiencing now in young adulthood, and helping people feel less alone and less stigmatized by what they've been through. And I'll tell you, I work with adults, I work with people in their 60s, I work with people who are 18 years old and just showing up on campus, and everybody is more or less worried about the same thing, which is, am I crazy?
Mm-hmm.
I feel all this guilt, and I don't know what to do with it. And that's, working through the shame. And I really want meaningful relationships, and I don't know how to do it while I'm going through this.
Mm.
As somebody who is, established in their lives is very concerned about having meaningful relationships. Somebody who is really young in their lives is also really concerned with having meaningful relationships. And so, it's really connecting people where they are and being like, okay, you're 18 years old. I wish somebody told me when I was 18 years old how to navigate conflict, how to like talk about having boundaries, how to in real time, like real talk, real examples, talk about what it's like to reach out for help. This next generation, they're fucking amazing. Like they have like all the language. They have so much more of a deeper understanding of mental health, of like healthy relationships. They're so fucking cool. And being on campus is amazing with them and like always deeply humbling. Um, and also they compliment my outfits. And then I like dine out on that for like 6 months.
Talking with Alisa Zipursky. The book is called Healing Honestly, the Messy and Magnificent Path to Overcoming Self-Blame and Self-Shame. I'm imagining just writing the book in and of itself was a process and a journey. Um, Tidbits, stories you want to share that have come from
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So something really wild has happened, which is that the like passage that most people I see like either call out in an email to me or they post it on social media is this passage in the very beginning of the introduction of the book that almost did not make the book and was not in the original manuscript and wasn't even through all the edits. It was something that came because we had somebody who was on the team, peripherally on the sort of team of creating this book, and she put all of these notes in like the final manuscript, basically saying, not basically saying, actually saying, you need to share more about your trauma. Your timeline doesn't add up. Your abuser, is he alive here? Oh my gosh, he's still alive. You didn't make that clear. What ages were you when this happened? This, that, and the other. These really, really re traumatizing questions of needing thinking that they're entitled to my story. This is not a
Mhm.
memoir, right? I use my story as an example and as a storytelling device, but it's not a memoir. But that they thought that they and therefore readers were entitled for me to share more than I was comfortable with. And it also harped on these, what I think is a very outdated approach to understanding survivor stories, which is like, we don't need to bleed for you to feel connection to us, right? Like, if us sharing our stories and just telling our trauma ended sexual violence, we would have been done a long time ago. This shit was in the Bible. So we added, me and my incredible agent Danielle, we added this language at the very beginning of the book that I'd love to share, if that's
Sure,
okay.
of course.
That now is like the most highlighted thing, and it was so close to not making it at all. And this was directly a response to this woman. Okay. As we go on this journey, you may notice that I'm not sharing every detail of my story with you. You may have questions about the who, what, when, where, and why of my timeline, but I invite you to let go of those questions for now, because the point of this book is not what happened to me then. It's about what's happening to us now. It's about the questions we can explore together, the wisdom we can share with one another, and the community we can cultivate right here. Trauma is messy and nonlinear. We do not need to recount, nor may we be able to recount all the details of our abuse in order to share our stories with each other. And so I'm here to remind you as often as you need that our stories are our own to tell, however the hell we please. I hope that by sharing this with you, it may encourage you to see that your truth does not need to be wrapped up in a neat little bow for it to matter. Our stories do not have to be nice and tidy for other survivors to find support and healing in them. My story is messy and incomplete, but it is all mine, and I'm grateful to get to share it with you.
Mm, love that. I
Thank
think
you.
that feels like it gives a lot of people permission to finally share without having to do it so that that person or everyone else can understand it.
Absolutely. And I've heard it even has helped people share with their therapists about their own trauma because people carry that in all of their relationships, including their therapeutic ones, where you and I know, a therapist is there to validate and to help reduce shame, but that the shame that we've been conditioned by the world to feel can be such a barrier that we might not even be able to tell our therapist because we're like, oh my God, I don't have all
Mhm.
the answers. What if they think I need all the answers, or else they're going to think that what happened to me isn't real?
Right. And that sad, sad to say is a predominant sentiment in our culture right now. What you can't remember what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. And we could go on all, I have a whole other world and a lot of the work I do um, with therapists, with clinicians, with advocates is around trauma and memory and sort of reframing the way we think about traumatic memory. Uh, because there is so many harmful societal pressures out there, communicating to survivors that what happened to us isn't quote unquote real and valid if we don't recall everything that happened. And so this book, and there's a whole chapter about memory in this book. It's the second one because I'm like, I want anybody to know who picks this up. If they have the same questions I had, which is like, if I don't remember, is it real? I want them to know, like, yes, everybody deserves healing and care and support and can find that for themselves in these pages. We all deserve it. It shouldn't require us to have to tell our stories. And I really, I'm glad that people can find it in the privacy of these pages for themselves at their own pace whenever it feels right to them.
So as we kind of wind down here, you mentioned you're working with therapists. In what context are you working with them? What capacity, rather, are you working with them?
Yeah. So, one is getting to talk with a lot of therapists like this in public facing conversations, which I'm so thrilled to do, and doing some trainings with organizations around questions of traumatic memory, around questions of sort of what CSA survivors really want, therapists and clinicians and social workers to know and understand about them. And then I'm also working with statewide coalitions against sexual violence, who are made up of lots of different legal, medical, social clinicians and workers and advocates who do this work. I next week will be giving an opening keynote at the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and then we'll be doing the same in Nevada in the upcoming months. And so I really am thrilled and honored to get to talk with people who work with survivors in these ways and to help support them do this work and to help them feel also well resourced,
Right.
because even though so many of them are survivors themselves, and I hear that, it takes all of us. It
Yeah.
takes all of us from different perspectives supporting somebody through their healing.
Awesome. Exciting. How do people reach you? What's the best way?
Yeah, you can reach me through healinghonestly.com and Alisa at healinghonestly.com, ALISA at
Okay.
healinghonestly.com. You can shoot me an email or follow me on social media as well.
All right. We'll have those linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Alisa, come on. You are freaking amazing. Seriously, so inspiring. That's why I love having you here. You're doing it. You're just like
Thank you.
you exude compassion and authenticity. And I hope that's what, my podcast is about. So welcome back anytime.
You always hype me up so well, Guy. I'm always thrilled to be in conversation with you.
It's the truth, man. So I love it. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.